Between the hills, the stars, the sky, the river so clear, river so clear.
Our opening words this morning are from the Reverend Gretchen Haley. Come in, all who long to know how to love this world, how to keep eyes open, hands unclenched, arms wide, breathing deeply in and out. This is a time to practice because there is still so much good and beauty and joy, but it can be hard to keep telling this tale with all the news, the wind and the rain and the trembling earth. Who wants the love in this life anyway? Come in, all who teeter on the edge of cynicism, brokenhearted, and trying to still remember laughter and kindness and the chance to be alive in these days when so much is at stake. In this place, we remind each other why we persist, giving each other courage to take this path that is not always easy to keep practicing. This love that cannot and will not let us go, and still calls on us. Come, let us be together. We light this chalice in celebration of joy, the flickering flame of a candle, a flame that shimmers, that dances, that cheers, the flame that heartens and encourages us in the hard times, the welcoming flame of this community.
Babies are crying like her heart will break. Open the window, let the dove fly. Neighbors round doors where the fence is so high. Open the window, let the dove fly. See what's to discover on the other side. Open the window, let the dove fly. Open the window, children. Open the window now. Open the window, children. Open the window, let the dove fly. Open the window, let the dove fly. Borders round countries, borders round the sky. Open the window, let the dove fly. See what's to discover on the other side. Open the window, let the dove fly. Some people have money, some people have none. Open the window, let the dove fly. What's the use of money if your heart's got none? Open the window, let the dove fly. Open the window, children. Open the window now. Open the window, children. Open the window, let the dove fly. Open the window, let the dove fly. Last time, open the window, children. Open the window now. Open the window, children. Open the window, let the dove fly. Open the window, let the dove fly. Open the window, let the dove fly.
This morning, our speaker is Leah Hargrove. Leah founded the Global Neighbors in 2015 to address the lack of welcoming services for new Americans in Bismarck-Mandan. She majored in international studies and French at the University of North Carolina, Asheville, and she's an alumna of the North Dakota Change Network and also received the 2018 Humanitarian of the Year Award for Bismarck. She hopes that Bismarck continues to be a safe, welcoming community for everyone. So please welcome Leah.
Yeah, I'm the founder of Global Neighbors. We're a nonprofit. We're downtown Bismarck, and we work with new Americans and immigrants in the community. And that sort of entails everything. I won't walk you through everything we do. But basically, if somebody's from a different country or they don't speak English well, they can show up at my door, and we'll figure out what they need and where to send them in the community. And the main reason we do that sort of stems from my own experience having been a newcomer in North Dakota and also having lived for a short time abroad and realizing just how lonely and isolating it can be to be a new person in a new place. And I don't know how many North Dakotans have had that experience. When I meet people, I don't feel like there's quite as much like international travel or cross-cultural mixing as maybe I grew up with in the South. And so if you enter a community that has, big families and they're very tight-knit and you're the newcomer, you're the outsider, it can be really difficult. It can be very lonely. So what I wanted to talk about today is less about the work that we do and more about the reason that we do it. So I'm going to give you a little background on why I picked this topic in this angle. I get asked pretty frequently to go out and speak at the university, and often talk about sort of the nuts and bolts of immigration. Who comes here? How do they get here? Why do they come? But I got asked to speak at a different class, and I think it was a Catholic social teachings class, and they said, "Can you come and just talk about human dignity? What does your work have to do with human dignity?" And I was like, wow, I've never spoken on that before. It's very intrinsic to the work, but I've never sat down and thought, what would I tell a community about human dignity when it comes to newcomers in that population? So that's what I want to talk about today. And because I don't like to just lecture at people, I'm going to weave in a lot of stories that have happened here in Bismarck and here in Mandan. So I grew up in North Carolina in a really diverse community. There weren't many immigrants when I was growing up. I remember being in the 4th grade and a little girl from Mexico moved to our school, and we just looked at her like she was a foreign princess. Like we had never met anybody that didn't speak English. It was bizarre to us and so interesting that my community had, it was predominantly Native American and then sort of evenly split with the rest of the group between white Americans and Black Americans. So I was just used to my classrooms looking different, the leaders in my community looking different, people doing things differently. Went to school for international studies and thought I would live and work my life abroad, but I got married and my husband brought us to Grand Forks. And I cried a lot because it is not where I thought I would be. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with all this study. I just put in all these dreams I had in my heart. And we showed up in Grand Forks and I had a lot of culture shock. One, it was very homogenous. It was very Norwegian, Swedish. The weather was a total shock. And the culture difference from like the South to the Midwest was a culture shock. My coworkers never invited me out to lunch, had me over to their homes. And so I just assumed they didn't like me for like a year, just because it was so different from how people are received in my culture. Not that the South is perfect by any means, but we just have a different approach to strangers. And so I spent that first year very isolated. And then we had a surprise baby kind of early. So that also was very isolating, right? We're 1,500 miles from our family. I don't know anybody. We're having a baby. My husband's a grad student. We're totally broke. Like it was really rough. At the time I was working at Lutheran Social Services, and they, for many years, did refugee resettlement in North Dakota. And so I would see, it wasn't my program, but I would see these people coming in and out from different countries. And I was intrigued about it, but I didn't know really anything about refugees. And there was a small nonprofit in Grand Forks that would pair mentors with new refugee families. And finally I thought, I need to do that. I'm losing the language I learned. I'm losing my connection to the international community. I need to do that. And I was partnered with a little girl from Cote d'Ivoire, Africa, a French-speaking country. Her mother and father were from Liberia, but because of the civil war there and unrest, they'd been separated. And her mother had been in Grand Forks for probably 6 to 7 years, and then her daughter was finally able to join her. Her daughter had grown up with a grandmother in Cote d'Ivoire and only spoke French, so she needed to learn English. I said, well, I speak French. So we were partnered together, and I would meet with her, because my son wasn't born yet, so I had lots of time. I can't imagine now like how I had so much time, pre-kids. And I would meet with her twice a week, and it was supposed to just be 1 hour a week, but we would meet several hours at a time, and I could practice my French with her family, and I could teach her English. And she was a kiddo. She was 7. She liked to go to Five Guys and get peanuts. We liked to go to the playground, and we would walk around the mall and look at the pet shop. My input into that relationship was very small, very small. I recognize that. Like, we're from this community. We have resources. We have high education. We have potential, and it wasn't asking a lot of me to spend time with her. The input her family put back into me was enormous. And anybody that spent time in the home of somebody who's a new immigrant here knows what I'm talking about. When I would come over, they would feed me, they would talk to me, they cared about me, they asked about the baby. They threw a baby shower for us. Like, they had so little and poured so much back into me and my husband. And so I did my mentorship program with Grace and her family, and we still remain quite close. I took off some time after I had my baby, and then I asked to be repartnered. And I was partnered now with a young woman named Anu. And Anu was from Nepal. And her family was like mine, a husband sort of early 30s, a wife mid-20s, and a 1-year-old baby boy. Anu spoke English, but now was with somebody that was kind of like me in a similar stage, brand new in a place she didn't know anything about. And we did different activities. I didn't have to teach her much English, but we would practice riding the bus. We would go to the grocery store, take the babies to the park. But mostly what we did was we sat on her floor on like a very plush carpet, and we would have chai and we would eat together. And again, I was giving so little into this, it was like the cost of gas to get to her apartment and a couple hours a week visiting. And she was pouring so much back into me, her stories, her struggles, her hopes and dreams. And it became very meaningful to me and a really important part of my life in Grand Forks. So fast forward 2 years, we did our 2 years in Grand Forks. My husband finished his grad school and we showed up in Bismarck. And I knew I had to continue that mentoring involvement. It had become a really crucial part of my life. And I was still working at LSS, and I went to their refugee program coordinator, who many of you might remember. It was Turtikan Tostakova. And I said, Turtikan, who's doing the mentoring program here? I'd like to do that. And she said, we don't have a mentoring program in Bismarck. And I thought that was very silly because it was pretty low stakes program. And I got together with some other, it wasn't just me, it was several other individuals in Bismarck that were either boomerangs or transplants like myself. And so we started Global Neighbors, and it started very small. Just partnering a local person with a new person. We asked them to meet together once a week for 6 months. And that's still our core program. We still do that, and you could be involved at any time if it interests you. Right when we were getting it going, we hadn't gotten far enough that we had partnered any families. We were still working on our bylaws. I had grown some vegetables in my yard. And this was my first North Dakota garden. I did not know about zucchini. It was such a mistake. I'll never do it again. But I think I had 10 or 12 plants. And so every day, it was horrible. It was horrible. It was an assault of zucchini. So just like everybody else, I'm trying to give it away as fast as I can. And I went to Turtikan. I said, please tell me if you know anybody that wants fresh vegetables. And she said, yeah, we've got this new family from Afghanistan. They're just across the way. So if you remember the old LSS office, it was over here kind of behind Hardee's. And there's some 3-floor apartment buildings back there as well that are pretty affordable. So a lot of refugee families will be placed there. And she said, you just walk over. I'll call and let them know you might come, but just walk over and knock on the door. They'll be happy to see you. Okay. So at this point, I didn't know anybody from Afghanistan. And I'm also not sure that yet in my life I had any friends that were Muslim. So this was a little bit of a learning curve for me, and I show up with my box of vegetables, and I knock on the door, and Zarguna opens it, and she looks at me, and I look at her, and I realize right away she doesn't speak any English, and I don't speak any Pashto. Thankfully, her husband was there, Nazir, and he had served with the U.S. Armed Forces, and that's how they became refugees. And he welcomed me in and had me sit, and we had tea. And we talked a lot, and I got to know them through Nazir translating. And I saw that they had small children. By this point, I had a small child and one on the way. And I said, could I come back with my child? And he said, yeah. So I came back a few days later. I brought my 1-year-old. Our 2 toddlers played, and their preschooler came and sat close to me. And Zarguna had made so much food. And if you have any friends from the Middle East, you know this as well. I mean, she really put a lot of effort. There was tea, there was coffee, there were pistachios and little treats and cookies and naan. So much, and she was so happy to see me, even though she didn't speak any English and I didn't speak any Pashto. And we spent a long time together, and Zarguna talked the whole time, nonstop, even when her husband wasn't there to translate. She was so happy to have somebody to talk to, and we did our best to kind of sign or use our hands to try to figure out what we were talking about with our kids or our food or what we liked. And I think I was there 2.5 hours. And when I got up to go, her husband, who had been working in a side room, came out and he met me at the door. And he said, I just want to thank you so much. This means so much to my wife. We've been here for 6 months and nobody's ever come to our apartment. And I got in my car and I just cried and cried and cried. And I cry every time I tell this story. Oh, thank you. I mean, I tell this story probably like 8 times a year and I still cry. Because Zarguna came to be one of my closest friends in Bismarck our first few years here. She learned English very quickly. I really never picked up much Pashto, maybe a handful of words. But she would give so richly of herself every time we would get together. She was always so happy to see me. Was sweet, was kind, was generous, was funny. She was really funny. And I hated to think that in my community, a mom like Zarguna or a person like Zarguna would be alone all the time, and that nobody was benefiting from the gifts she had to share with the community, and that she was feeling unseen and sort of stuck in her apartment. Like if you're new to North Dakota, you find out really quick that this is not a place for half the year you can walk or bike or go outside and play in the playground. So many of the refugees I work with will tell me that their whole lives are, I go to work, I come home, and then Saturdays I go to Walmart, Sundays I might go to church. But they just kind of live in this series of boxes where they're not connected to the community. And I decided after I met Zarguna that I wasn't going to live in a community where that's how people had their existence. I wouldn't want to live like that. I don't want other people to live like that, particularly if the only reason their lives are that way is because of a language barrier or a cultural barrier. So that really affected our work at Global Neighbors. Moving beyond the idea that, oh, new people need help learning English, new people need to learn how to drive, to our new Americans that come are often deeply isolated. They're not coming with built-in connections and relatives or friends here. And then there's often a language barrier that makes that step even harder to build those things. I don't want to live somewhere where people suffer the effects of isolation and anxiety and depression. But also I don't want to live somewhere where we don't get to benefit from the beautiful things these people are bringing into our community just because we don't know they're there or because we're too scared to cross that language barrier and get to know them. So Global Neighbors began to start this mentoring program and get very active in it. And as we began to do it, we began to realize things that you all realize, that there are deeper systemic issues in American life and American society that make it hard for people to have a fair shot here and to be part of the community. So now, in addition to our mentorship program, we do refugee resettlement. We welcome new families. We do a lot of advocacy. We go out in the community and talk about who's here, how did they get here, why are they here, what did they have to contribute, how can we help. We also do a lot of celebration. We're planning an international festival for this summer. We like to do community potlucks. We want people to cross bridges, build bridges and cross divides and get to know each other. But for me, it all stems out of this core value that I want to live in a healthy community. I want my children to grow up in a healthy community. And if it's not healthy for all of us, it's not healthy for any of us. And that applies to our friends and neighbors who come from other countries and who haven't learned our language, who haven't figured out the climate, who haven't figured out the culture. When I went to speak most recently at this Catholic Studies class about human dignity, I was trying to figure out a way to make it relatable for students. I'm not Catholic, but I'm familiar with the same scriptures and teachings that they would use. And so I told them, there's a story at in the Christian New Testament that they may or may not be familiar with. And it's a story about Jesus sort of looking at groups of people and saying, you did kind things to me, or you did not do kind things to me. And they say, when did we do anything to you? And he says, when you did it to the most vulnerable in the community. But the example that he uses is, I was hungry and you fed me. I was naked and you clothed me. I was in prison and you visited me. And I was a stranger and you welcomed me. And I think it can be really easy for Americans to look at the big problems in society as being people are hungry people are homeless. But as I told the Catholic students, I said, in your teaching, in your religion, what's recognized as being just as painful or as difficult is being a stranger. I said, and I think it's important to realize we don't just have physical ailments and challenges in the world, but we have spiritual ones, and they're important. Like they sometimes they can hurt more than the physical ones. Sometimes being an outcast or being lonely is much more difficult than being hungry. Has anybody ever been like the new kid at school, like switched high school? Okay, I have not, and I'm so glad. It sounds like an awful experience, and I just can imagine, like, if I had to start a new high school, I'd rather not eat lunch the whole week than have to be that kid sitting by themselves at the table. Like, it's not fun, and I think a lot of spiritual traditions recognize that being the stranger requires the host community to step up and be welcoming and hospitable, over and beyond what we might do to our neighbors and family that we already have here. So I hope and pray every day at Global Neighbors that we keep that experience centered. No matter what changes with policies, either national or local, no matter what changes with which groups are arriving and which groups are departing. When I first moved to Bismarck, it was lots of people from the Congo and Iraq and Liberia. Now it's lots of people from Ukraine and the Pacific Islands. Every 4 or 5 years, there's this big shift of who's here. And I just remember that A, there's a big learning curve for every new group, but B, the core value is the same. People are coming. They're most likely being very isolated. What is my responsibility as a member of the host community to make sure that they have the same sense of place and belonging and hope that my family has here? Because we're transplants too. Like, we came with the language. We look like we belong here. But it was difficult, and we're very grateful for the welcome that we've received over the years in North Dakota. Kim told me that I would be able to leave time for questions, and I want to, because I think people do have a lot of questions about, like, who's here in the community, or how are things affecting them politically, and sort of what are long-term goals. But I want to just finish with some opportunities. You can take or leave these. I'm never offended. But if you're curious about newcomers and you want to get to know them, we always have a lot of volunteer opportunities at Global Neighbors, particularly our mentorship program, where I take a new person, partner them with a local person, you spend an hour a week together, basically helping show them around the community, show them your own culture, your own values, your holidays, your things, the little hidden gems you have in Bismarck that you want to share. While you're receiving from them their stories, their culture, their food, you're spending time in their home, where you might be the only one who doesn't speak the language, which is a good experience for North Dakotans to have. It happened with me in Zarguna, where I needed to use the bathroom at her house, and I did not know how to ask her. And we kind of figured it out. And then I went into her bathroom, and like we were missing some of the basic accessories an American would require in the bathroom. And I was like, oh boy, I don't know how to explain this to her. Like, I assume she, her husband's very educated, that they would have some hygiene basics, but maybe they don't. And I need to tell her, but this is going to be awkward. And I definitely can't have her husband translate it. And anyway, when I left the door of the bathroom, she was standing there with a roll of toilet paper and a bottle of soap, staring at me, because she couldn't tell me that she had those things. And I couldn't tell her that I did require those, and I know what they're for. It was, yeah, and it was a good experience for me, because it made me deeply compassionate for when my friends go out in the community and struggle to make themselves understood and get the resources that they need. Yep, so we have mentoring is always an option. It's always a lot of fun. It's always an adventure. We also are always looking for short-term volunteers. We have a lot of families, particularly single moms, that need help with transportation. So if you're like, I don't have a lot of free time, but once a week, Tuesday mornings, I can give somebody a ride to English class, we could really use that. That's a huge help. If you're really brave, you can help teach driving. That's another. So we don't get a lot of takers on that one. Federal funding deeply affects us, like it does other immigrant serving organizations. Over the next 6 to 7 months, we're going to be looking for donations and financial support from all around our community, just to keep our doors open. But lastly, and most importantly, it would be to be welcoming. If you see somebody that's new from another place, I think sometimes we can want to not engage for two reasons. Either it's too scary, I don't know how to talk to them, or I don't want to single them out. Like, this lady has a hijab. I don't want to come up to her and be like, oh, I saw you, you look different. Where are you from? But the fact of the matter in North Dakota still is immigrants stand out. Still, they know they stand out. We all know they stand out. You see them right away. You're not going to make them more stand out by coming over to speak and be friendly. And so I always encourage people that if you see somebody from a new place to smile and say hello, and if you have a minute to talk, just to get them to know them a little bit. Ask them some questions, what they think about North Dakota, what's different about the culture. It means a lot to people to be seen as a person and not just how they're appearing in our community.
You mentioned that you work closely with Cloverdale. Are other employers seeking your assistance with cultural training or enrichment or anything like that?
Yeah, and it's kind of been a recent development, but I've been glad to see it. Sanford has been a big one, both in like taking care of their employees and in taking care of their patients, which I'm really encouraged to see. The North Dakota Hospital Association just connected with us last week, but I think it helps because their director is himself an immigrant, so I think he's very sympathetic. But also economically, they don't want to see nurse turnover, right? They want to see these expensive hires stay in North Dakota. So we are seeing more of that. And to a certain extent, we have good curiosity from our public schools and social services about, hey, we're getting a lot of families from this country. What do? We don't know how to take care of them, or they're presenting with a different issue than we normally see. We don't know what to do about that. And I'm glad to see more of that in North Dakota, because when I first moved here, a lot of what I saw in Bismarck was, it's not our problem. Particularly around like language access. If somebody showed up and they didn't speak English, like, it's not our problem. And that's getting a lot better. So I'm grateful to our community for that change. And I, despite like a lot of, ugly stuff I see on social media or nationally, generally I think the consensus is in this part of North Dakota that we're dependent on immigrants economically, and it would be in our best interest to be good friends. And, it's a slow process, but I think it's getting better.
Our closing and extinguishing the chalice words are from the Reverend Scott Taylor. Kick the ball, dance in the rain, get lost on purpose, fly the kite, smell the flowers, put out all the paints. Let life take you by the hand, lean back and let the wind mess up your hair or what's left of it. Open to joy that's been waiting for you. Behold its delight. Don't you know that you've already won the prize? So go out and share it. Namaste.
Put a little love in your